My name is Cameron Powell, and welcome back to White Noise. Today's episode is a feature about LGBT plus injustice, namely the violence that LGBT individuals face, as well as the discrimination that they face on a daily basis. Let's jump right into it. An article on the Mother Jones website written by Jackie Mogensen called 2017 the deadliest year for trans people. The article stated that violence against trans people isn't new, and even still, we're far from understanding the full scope of the problem. In the past 5 years alone, HRC calculated more than 100 trans deaths due to violence, according to media reports. This is likely an underassessment because many cases go unreported and victims sometimes aren't identified as transgender in news reports. More than half of those 100 victims lived in the South. Nearly 6% were victims of gun violence, and about 85% of those people were people of color. Now, Holly, what do you think is the main reason behind these egregious numbers?
The fact that they see us as breaking away from these entrenched gender norms that are so heavily enforced. To a man who sees a trans woman, they're gonna see us as men who have almost betrayed them and become women just to mess up their system.
I think the main reason behind these murders are typically the area of where they occur. I guess most people don't find the South to be the most welcoming of people of color anyway, or LGBT people. So when you put both of those together, it automatically creates a dynamic for destruction. From where I'm from, I was born in Hawaii, so it's trans people there all the time. It's not something that you have to learn. It's just a custom. So here I think it's more of the surprise factor.
The main reason behind the murders is just people not understanding and not wanting to accept. I think right now there's a lot of turmoil in our country in general, so people are a bit on edge on all sides of the sphere. People aren't going to react well to things that they don't understand or know, and fear tends to lead to violence.
I think that the main motivation is the identifying characteristics of the group members who are suffering this violence, and the primary identifying characteristics seem to be transgender identity or trans identity to some extent, and racial identity. And when violence is kind of a social injustice, it's usually the case that people are targeted because of their membership in a certain group. And people understand they're liable to violence due directly to their membership in a certain group, regardless of whether they've experienced that violence or not.
Do you think that as a country we will exceed these numbers, and if so, why?
I would like to say no. I would hope that I could say no confidently. I would prefer them going down and people not being murdered. But with the way people aren't communicating and the way that people are getting angrier and angrier in our country, when someone sees something they don't like, they're more likely to act out in violence if they already have anger.
As a country, will we exceed these numbers? Yes, because people are still not talking about these issues. These are things that need to be taught to kids at a very young age, because if they're not being taught by someone else and they're not being taught at home, they will never know. So again, when you're shocked and in awe, it's a fight or flight kind of thing. Either you're gonna fight the situation or you're gonna run from it, and most people have been taught that you're not supposed to run because it makes you less of a person. So you're gonna fight about it and take it out on other people. So until we are able to teach people at a younger age and make sure they understand what this is and who these people are, we're going to continue that cycle, which means as a country we will have growing numbers, and this will continue to happen.
So I think there is a reason why we might see the numbers go up that might not mean that the violence is going up, and that's due to the fact that if more trans individuals are properly identified as trans, then that will expose just how pervasive the violence is. And right now, some of that violence is invisible as trans-related violence. And so once we get better at acknowledging and recognizing and properly crediting trans individuals for their identifying characteristics, then we'll see that the problem is probably bigger than it looks right now, according to the numbers. But that just means that right now it's worse than the data tell us, right? And so that's some reason to think it's going to go up just, mathematically. But I hope that in the long run, the violence itself goes down, regardless of the numbers per se, because of increased inclusivity.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I mean, there was already a shooting in a trans nightclub this year that got almost no media attention. There have been issues with like a lot more trans murders this year as well. And we're only in March, so I can't see us not surpassing the numbers from last year. It's bound to happen. Hate crimes are going to go up whenever we have people in positions of power who are hateful and are promoting hateful activity. Whenever we have people in positions of power who won't denounce the alt-right. Whenever we have people in positions of power who will actively say like horrible things about people just due to their race or their gender, hate crimes are going to go up. It's become normalized in our society that it's okay to hurt people because you don't think that like they're okay due to your religion or due to like just like the way that you were raised. Like we think that it's okay for people to be violent for no real reason, and that's normalized. These people get so much media attention. They get looked at from like the let's defend the devil type point of view, and people try to almost make their case for them, and I don't think that we should do that. I think we have to sit there and say like, no, this is wrong, and actually denounce it. And I don't think that that's such a hard thing to ask people, but over the past couple of years, we've definitely seen that it is.
What do you think can be done to prevent things like these murders and these deaths and this violence against trans people specifically? What do you think can be done to keep this from happening?
Nothing can be done to prevent anything, you know? We can only educate and hope for better in the future, but we can never eradicate the situation because every new generation is going to have their own struggle that they deal with. So it will never be an issue that will just die.
Historically, what leads to more open-mindedness and acceptingness and inclusion and willingness to tolerate a diversity of identifying characteristics is exposure to these experiences, the experiences of those who deviate from the dominant culture and the norms and the ideals of that. And so what we need is a greater voice, I think, for all individuals who are deviating from the dominant culture. And that exposure, I think, really helps to change cultural attitudes and increase acceptance. We shouldn't settle for mere acceptance, of course, but to increase that thing, which is an important first step. But that means listening to people that we just historically and structurally have our society built to just sort of not have as much of a voice. And so there may need to be some kind of important changes to just customs and assumptions regarding who we listen to, who we take as authority, whose voice we respect, whose voice we give a platform to.
This thing would be education, teaching people, reaching out in the community. That's not necessarily something that trans people have to do or need to do because it goes into the problem of who should stop oppression, who should fight oppression. Is it the oppressed or the oppressor? It really should be the oppressor who should stop the oppression, but then they would lose a seat of power. And so it tends to be up to the oppressed people to educate, and that can be very tiring. So I know for me, it's best for me to talk about it because I do identify as non-binary and agender, so no gender, but that's very difficult for people to see on the outside. So when someone looks at me, they're not necessarily afraid because I fit a stereotype of a woman.
Any hierarchical system is going to cause struggles in power, right? And so men see trans people as some sort of like stab in the side to their system of power, and so as long as like these systems of power are in place where men are seen as better than women, and so long as we have it to where like straight people and cis people are like seen as what's normal, so long as there's like some hierarchical system there will always be this type of violence. We have to uproot those systems of oppression.
So, I definitely don't think the media does a perfect job of representing all who deserve representation in our society. There does seem to be some improvements in those areas. In some media outlets, there is kind of an increased diversity of media outlets and voices available, just given the internet and the developments that came from that. And so there are lots of sources available and people gaining traction in getting more of a public presence in society. But that certainly doesn't mean that there isn't a lot of important work to be done to make sure that the media is as fair and unbiased as possible and is careful to appropriately represent all those who deserve representation.
Can't find information about this stuff when I'm looking for it. Much less do I just like hear it on the radio or see it on the news. Like, nobody talks about this when it happens. I mean, Trans Day of Remembrance, it's a national holiday, but how many people have actually heard of it, where we actually remember the trans people that are killed every year? We had a service here in Mobile. We advertised it a good bit, like 30 people came, because it's just that the local media, they will not cover it. The national media, they will not cover it. And when they do, it's because they want to put some sort of spin on it, or because they're trying to make some sort of identity politics grab at trying to win votes for something. It's not because they actually care. It's never talked about unless we can be used as the butt of a joke, or if we can be used as some reason to get somebody to vote for you.
Oftentimes the media just picks something up very quickly and runs with it for 2 days, and then they drop it, and then they'll pick it up real quick. Oftentimes people and the media will run with something because they feel like it's popular. They'll feel like it'll get likes or retweets or something like that, but it doesn't necessarily change anything. It at least brings attention to it, and I appreciate it for that, but when it goes away so quickly and we still don't actually have a conversation about these issues, we're not going to get anywhere.
No, because it's not something that you hear on the news often. You don't really hear about trans people of color or trans people of anything being murdered on the news. It's usually local outlets that you hear it, or you see it on social media, or you hear from a friend, but MSNBC and CNN are not telling you about these numbers. They're too busy worrying about what Trump tweeted about yesterday.
Do you think that the factors of race, religion, and education affect LGBTQ plus individuals in society?
Well, I can definitely tell you that trans women of color are the most likely group to be murdered in the country. Trans women in general are the most likely group to be murdered, but if you add that of color there at the end, that's a huge difference, and people often forget that. The cis white gay guys get married and we think, oh, everything is fine now. But that's not really the case. Whenever we look at poor people of color who are LGBT, they often face much more violence, much more discrimination in schools. They get worse educations because of that, because people either will refuse to teach them or they're harassed, so they don't want to go to school, and it becomes more and more of a compounding issue. I feel like religion is the big one that we really have to address, because we never talk about how people either say that religion is completely harmful or completely helpful to LGBT people, and there's no in between. No one ever sits there and talks about how some of the most supportive groups in our area for LGBT people, some of the people who donate the most money towards LGBT events, put the most time and effort into taking care of the LGBT community, are churches. But then also on the other side of that is the people who are going out and having protests against trans people are also extremely religious people. So I feel we have people who they either use religion to try to shove us into some sort of conversion therapy or make us suppress our feelings, or they use religion to try to make us feel accepted. And here at a Catholic school, I've seen such a mix of both of those types of things, and it's kind of shocking sometimes just how one thing that we all feel is like definitely on one side or the other can really be so nuanced and different.
I feel race plays a huge part because in my experience, I've had the opportunity to travel a lot of places, and a lot of other races are a lot more accepting of the LGBTQ plus community than others. Particularly feel that in the African American community, it's a lot less accepted than everywhere else. And it's sad because the LGBTQ plus community and the African American community have a lot in common. They're both been fighting for rights that, were bestowed upon all humans, but then they were, decided to be less than, and they don't get them. They've marched, they've been killed, they've been bombed. LGBTQ plus people have been through the same situations that African Americans have been through, but it's crazy that it seems that African Americans are the less accepting of the LGBTQ plus community. Why? I don't know. I think it's the education, because like I said, if you're not learning about it in school, you're learning about it at home. And unfortunately, in the African American community, we learn about hypermasculinity, and anything that's not seen as hypermasculine is not okay.
So what role do you think millennials, specifically people in our age group, can and should play in creating a safer community for LGBTQ plus individuals?
I think that we can't just focus on making it a safer community for LGBTQ plus individuals if we want it to be a safer community for LGBTQ plus individuals. I think we have to focus on making it a safer community in general. I think we have to focus on making the world a better place with less systems of oppression, less institutionalized racism, less institutionalized heterosexism. We need to make the world, our policies, our governmental, our economic systems all match up with our ideals, because right now they don't. Right now, trans women, trans men get paid less than cis people do, and then women get paid less than men. It's all because we allow these systems like capitalism to come in and dictate how we should live our lives under this system of authority. And so long as cis people feel like they are in a position of authority over trans people, there will continually be killings in the same way that police kill people because they are in a position of power and they feel like they can. So millennials have to go, and we have to say, all right, what are we going to do? We're going to vote, but we're not just going to vote. We're going to go out there every day and we're going to try to make a difference. We're going to try to make our community safer. We're going to put money and time into these types of LGBT youth groups or LGBT community centers, different things like that. So yeah, that's basically what I feel about it.
The coming generation has to be willing to pursue the roles in society that give you the power to do that. There are plenty of roadblocks to that, and it depends on your talents and your interests and your disposition. But I do hope that the next generation is ready to sort of kind of seize the reins and steer away from violence and hatred and exclusion, and to take on the roles that really give you the capability to make effective changes in society or to have a significant impact